is older widows, and he gives criteria who is a real widow, because we talked about how widows are the responsibility of first the children, and then if they don't have anybody, then it's the church. You know, they had a list of these widows, and the church is now responsible for them. You know, and basically their responsibility is becoming the church now. They serve God within the church walls. They pray. They encourage. You know, all of that. So we covered all of that last time. You know, so far as the older widows. Then he's going to look at younger widows. So what if a widow is younger than 60? How do you deal with that? Okay? Because that's one of the criteria he gave earlier. So 1 Timothy 5, and if someone can read verse 11.
As for younger widows, do not put them on such a list, for when their sensual desires overcome their dedication to Christ, they want to marry.
So he goes, don't put a younger widow on this list. And he's speaking about the list of the church, you know, taking care of them. Why? Because in the beginning, they're going through grief because they lost their husband. Okay? That's natural. Okay? Now, when that grief dissipates and they are younger, okay, they're going to look, there is a desire to marry. There is a desire to not be a widow, you know. And all of a sudden now, they're no longer a widow, but they're on the roll to be paid by the church. And he's going to give us the reasons why this is an issue in the next few verses. And he uses a word that's the only time is used in the Bible. It's an indulge, their excess sensuality. So all of a sudden there is a desire. Okay, now let me be clear. Paul is clear in Corinth saying there's no issue with remarrying. You know, and he's going to say it even here. They can remarry. There is no problem with that. His concern is, what is the church doing with them? You know, that's why he goes, don't put them on the list, because that's probably going to end up happening. Okay, and then there is going to be an issue within the church when you say, oh, well, we can't take care of you anymore. Okay, that's going to create an issue. So don't do it from the beginning. Okay, that's the concept of what he is speaking on. So let's look at what the issue is, and the next couple of verses are really, really awesome. You know what the issues are. So verse 12.
Having condemnation because they have cast off their faith first.
And verse 13.
And beside they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle but also gossips and busybodies, saying things which they ought not.
Okay. So the first issue, why don't put them on the list? Okay. He goes, having condemnation. Now he's not speaking about eternal condemnation here. Okay. Because these are, born again followers of Christ, or else you would never have put them on the list at all. Okay. What kind of condemnation is all of a sudden, first of all, internal condemnation, because I made a vow that I'm going to be serving the church, I'm going to be dedicated to prayer and supplication, I'm going to be a widow that is actually being in the church. And all of a sudden, I broke that vow. So I feel guilty. There is a self-condemnation. Okay? But not only that, you know who else is going to condemn? People in the church. They're going to say, didn't you make a vow that you're not going to remarry? That's why the church put you on the list to be taken care of. And now you're going to go and marry? Okay? So all of a sudden, they have an internal feeling of guilt because they broke a vow, to serve God within the church. And others are saying, well, why did you make a vow? And it kind of gives us an idea about the importance of vows in general, right? I love the words in Ecclesiastes. If you want to go with me to Ecclesiastes. Okay? Because sometimes we make vows and, a lot of times we don't mean it. And Ecclesiastes 5. And if someone can read verses 2 to 5.
Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth. So let your words be few. A dream comes when there are many cares, and many words mark the speech of a fool.
So he goes, let your words be few, which means think about what you're going to vow before you go out there and promise stuff and make a vow that you're going to do something. So these younger, widows said, oh, I'm going to dedicate myself to the Lord. I'm going to be in prayer and supplication. That church is going to be my home. And all of a sudden, desires flared up. They want to marry, and all of a sudden they can't keep both of these, so they have to give up one of them. So they give up the vow that they make to go and marry. So his saying is there is a condemnation that comes, back to. So he goes, having condemnation because they have cast off their first faith. That's the first issue with it, and that's why he's saying don't put them on the list. The verse right before. Now, the second issue is verse 13. Okay? And besides, they learn to be idle. Now, how do they learn to be idle? Okay, think about it. If you put them on the list, that means their expenses are paid, right? So, I can be lazy and do nothing because now everything is paid for, right? Okay? They learn to be idle, okay? And we're going to talk about it in discussion, the danger of being idle, okay? Let me tell you, the worst place for a Christian to be is be in a place of idleness. The enemy will have a field day, So here he goes, they will learn to be idle. Now, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that's just for women in the church, right? Like older women?
That's the younger widows.
So they make vows.
Yeah.
So that they won't remarry.
So they made vows, so are younger, okay?
Yeah.
Because remember, when we studied the first part of it, there are certain criteria. One of them is they're older, over 60. He gives criteria to these widows. So he goes, what if they're younger? What if a widow is like 30 years old, 35 years old?
So it's better for them not to make vows and
correct.
if they so desire to remarry at one point.
Exactly. And he gives the reasons why. One of them is the vow that they make is going to be an issue later on because there is going to be condemnation, of what they are leaving. Okay? And then they're going to learn to be idle. And if they learn to be idle, it's going to lead to wandering about from house to house. Okay? When you have plenty of time in your hands, you're going to create a lot of trouble. That's usually what happens. When you're busy doing something, you don't have much time to do that. Okay? That's what he's saying. Wandering about from house to house. Okay? Not only idle, but also gossips. Okay? So they start now, oh, did you hear so-and-so said this? And, oh, I heard this in the church. And why? Because, they don't have they're idle. They're not busy doing something. Okay? And busy bodies, which kind of brings up a lot of, questions, which that's kind of our main discussion afterwards. Okay? But, the word gossip here is loose talkers. And if you want to have an example, it's like someone blowing bubbles. Those bubbles that the kids blow? That's gossip. Blowing bubbles. And then it kind of boom, it carries everywhere. Okay? Like telephone, exactly. So that's, babbling in whatever comes to mind. That's gossiping, So they wander, they gossip, and then they become busybodies, which is meddling, okay, and putting themselves into other people's business. Okay? So all of a sudden now I want to know what's the scoop about what everybody else is doing. No, just keep yourself in whatever you're doing. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Yeah. But that's the issue with these younger widows. These younger widows, not only there is condemnation, okay, but you're going to lead them to a place where they're going to create division within the church. That's why you need to be very careful. If you go to Second Thessalonians, which is the book right before that, look at what Paul tells the church here. Okay? And the word disorderly is undisciplined. When someone is undisciplined in their life. Okay? So when you're hearing that word, you can kind of understand what you're reading. 2 Thessalonians 3. And if someone can read 2 Thessalonians 3, 10 to 12. He's speaking to a church now, not only widows.
For even when we were with you, we commanded you this: if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat. For we hear that there are some who walk among you in disorderly manner, who are not working at all, but are busybodies.
Mm-hmm.
Now those who are such, we command and exhort through our Lord Jesus Christ that they work in quietness and eat their own bread.
Okay. So we're hearing that among you, okay, there is those who are basically undisciplined. They don't have a discipline in their life. Okay. Which is going to lead to a lot of issues within the church. Okay. So be careful. That's an area we need to be very careful with, because you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble the minute you get to the point of idleness, where you're not disciplined in how you're living your life. Okay? Being disciplined is healthy for a Christ follower. Being idle, okay? Remember Eve, right? Nothing is happening, so let me wander around, Oh, there is this tree. Oh, there is this serpent appearing. Why don't you take this? And you know the rest of the story. Okay? You see this throughout the Word of God, the danger of it.
I have a question.
Yes?
How can you be idle and be a busybody at the same time?
Because you're busybody in other people's issues, not in your own, what you're doing. Okay? It's kind of like when, you want to know what everybody else is doing, and they connect, right? Busybodies with gossip. So because you take and then you go to someone and you say, do you hear, we need to pray for her. And a lot of times it comes through like, oh, we need to pray for that person. So you can be the word busybody is like, I am interjecting myself in someone else's business that is not my business to interject. That's busybody, yeah.
So for these women who are like widows and stuff.
Yeah.
Because when you read this, you just assume that like they're broke, they ain't got no money. But weren't they ever, any of these women married to men who died and were wealthy?
You don't know, they're wealthy.
Yeah.
And
Does
actually,
this go to like certain women who maybe don't have
yeah,
who
and
can't take care of themselves? Because there has to be women back then whose husbands died and they didn't need the church to take care of them.
if they have, here is what you know about the early church. The early church were mostly the low class of society. Yeah, not the upper class. So most of the Christians in the early church were the peasant. They were called the peasants. So they weren't, so it would be hard to find someone in that case like, oh, I married a rich person and now I have plenty of money. And so he's speaking to Timothy as he's leading a church. And the common situation is you're going to have this issue. They're going to come, they don't have anything. You're going to give them what they need to live on, okay? And if they're younger, they're going to end up doing this, and then you're going to be in trouble. That's...
Oh, I have one more.
Yeah.
So, for the women, like, 'cause I'm pretty sure they're not the ones really pursuing a man when they want to marry. What if there's a man who wants to marry them?
If I...
Like, if they're being pursued,
Yeah.
they're not the ones, like,
Mhm.
pursuing,
In either case, they made a vow to do what? when they came to say, you know what, I want to be on that list, I want to be taken care of by the church. Well, the idea is they're going to be serving it within the church. Okay? They're going to be praying, prayer, supplication, kind of all of what we talked about the beginning of that chapter. Okay? So, in either way, whether someone comes, if I made a vow, I'm going to say, you know what? No, that's not me. This is where my heart is, and this is what God called me to do in this season. Okay? But when they're younger, not older, okay, the tendency is that's not going to happen. The tendency is they're going to, regardless of who started it, whether a man came and approached them or they went to, it doesn't matter the encounter itself.
Does it say, I mean, I can't remember when we first started Timothy, but does it say where they took the vow? Like, is there a part?
Well, right here, when what we just said. But